Welcome to Fatal Flashbacks, the podcast that delves into the most chilling crimes and haunting mysteries from the past. Each week, we rewind through time to explore cases that shocked the world, stories of betrayal, tragedy, and justice that linger in the shadows of history. So get comfortable and prepare to journey into the past, because sometimes the echoes of the past are louder than we expect. Today's episode is the Rettendon Murders. On a cold December morning in 1995, a farmer made a grim discovery in a quiet Essex lane. Inside a blood-soaked Range Rover were the bodies of 3 men, executed in a style that spoke of a calculated, ruthless crime. This was the Rettendon Murders, an event that sent shockwaves through the UK and became a defining moment in the history of organised crime in Britain. The victims, Tony Tucker, Patrick Tate, and Craig Rolfe, were not ordinary men. They were at the heart of Essex's booming drug trade, their names synonymous with power, greed, and violence. But what led to their violent demise? And who was responsible for one of the most infamous gangland executions in modern British history? This case wasn't just a crime, it was a cultural phenomenon. It exposed the dark underbelly of the rave scene and the ecstasy trade that dominated the 1990s. The brutal killings gripped the public, inspiring headlines, books, and films like Essex Boys and Rise of the Foot Soldier. Yet for all its media coverage, the case remains steeped in mystery and controversy. In today's episode, we'll explore the chilling details of the Rettendon Murders, unpack the key evidence, and delve into the theories that still spark debate. Was this a simple case of a drug deal gone wrong? Or was there more to this story than meets the eye? Stay tuned as we navigate the facts, the fallout, and the legacy of a crime that haunts Essex decades later. In the early hours of December 7th, 1995, farmer Peter Theobald and his friend Ken Jiggins tended to their land near Workhouse Lane, Rettendon, a quiet rural area in Essex. It was there, in a secluded spot often frequented by hunters, that they came upon a Range Rover parked on a muddy farm track. The vehicle's engine was off, its interior eerily still. As they approached, it became clear something was wrong. Inside the car were 3 lifeless bodies, slumped and bloodied, victims of a brutal execution-style murder. The 3 men were later identified as Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe. Each had been shot multiple times at close range with a shotgun, leaving no chance of survival. The crime scene was chilling in its precision. The positioning of the bodies suggested that the victims had been caught off guard, possibly lured to the location under false pretenses. Rolfe, who was driving, remained in the driver's seat, while Tucker and Tate were seated in the passenger seats. Their deaths were swift, calculated, and merciless. Patrick Tate, 37, was a notorious figure in the Essex underworld, known for his violent temper and reputation as an enforcer. Tony Tucker, 38, was a high-profile drug dealer linked to the booming rave and ecstasy scene, often seen as the face of the group's operations. Craig Rolfe, 26, was the youngest of the trio and served as a driver and trusted associate. Together, they controlled a significant portion of the local drug trade, amassing wealth and enemies in equal measure. On that cold December night, their world of power and influence came crashing down. Forensic evidence suggested the men had been ambushed, the assailants exploiting the isolation of Workhouse Lane to carry out the killings without interruption. The victims were each shot at close range with a pump-action shotgun, a weapon chosen for its devastating impact. Rolfe was believed to have been shot first, likely to disable the driver and prevent any escape. Tucker and Tate followed swiftly, each methodically shot multiple times. The sheer violence of the attack underscored its intent. This was no random act of violence, but a meticulously planned execution. The scene left investigators grappling with more questions than answers. Who would dare to eliminate 3 of Essex's most feared criminals in such a bold and calculated manner? And what had led these men to their violent deaths in the dead of night? These questions would ignite a high-profile investigation, drawing the public and media into a case that would captivate the nation for years to come. The victims of the Rettendon Murders were deeply entrenched in the Essex underworld, each playing a pivotal role in the region's organised crime and drug trade. Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe weren't just associates, they were a powerful trio who dominated the lucrative ecstasy trade that fueled the rave culture of the 1990s. Together, they formed a dangerous alliance built on power, profit, and intimidation. Patrick Tate, the eldest at 37, was the muscle of the group. A career criminal with a fearsome reputation, Tate was known for his violent tendencies and involvement in large-scale drug deals. His imposing presence and willingness to use force made him a key enforcer in the gang's operations. Tate's criminal history included time in prison, but even behind bars, he maintained his connections to the underworld, cementing his role as a feared figure in Essex. Tony Tucker, 38, was the strategist. A high-ranking drug dealer, Tucker controlled much of the ecstasy trade linked to the booming rave scene. The rave culture of the early 1990s was marked by vibrant music, crowded dance floors, and a growing demand for recreational drugs, particularly ecstasy. Tucker's role was to ensure a steady supply of pills to clubs and parties, reaping substantial profits from the scene's popularity. His ties to security firms and nightclub owners allowed him to operate with relative impunity, solidifying his position as a major player. Craig Rolfe, at just 26, was the least experienced but no less essential. Often described as the driver and errand runner for the group, Rolfe was fiercely loyal to Tucker and Tate. Despite his lower rank, Rolfe had aspirations of climbing the criminal hierarchy, but his association with such volatile figures ultimately sealed his fate. The trio's relationship was defined by a clear hierarchy. Tucker, with his business acumen, acted as the leader, managing the logistics of their drug operations and maintaining crucial contacts in the nightclub scene. Tate provided the muscle, ensuring compliance from rivals and associates alike. Rolfe, while not an equal partner, was a trusted subordinate who carried out their orders without question. Their dominance, however, came at a cost. Their involvement in the dangerous and unpredictable drug trade earned them numerous enemies. The rave scene, while profitable, was rife with competition, betrayals, and territorial disputes. As their wealth and influence grew, so did the risks. The trio's relationships with one another were also strained by greed and ambition, creating cracks in their seemingly solid alliance. By the time of their deaths, Tate, Tucker, and Rolfe were living on borrowed time in a world where power shifts quickly and violently. Their high-profile lifestyles and criminal dealings made them both envied and feared, but ultimately, they became targets themselves. Their downfall in December 1995 was a stark reminder of the perils of their chosen path, leaving a legacy of intrigue and tragedy in its wake. The investigation into the Rettendon murders posed significant challenges for the Essex police. The execution-style killings of Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe were carried out with chilling precision, leaving few immediate leads. The rural crime scene, tucked away on a remote farm track, offered little forensic evidence, and the victims' deep involvement in organized crime complicated the search for suspects. The trio's numerous enemies and criminal connections meant investigators were faced with a web of potential motives and perpetrators. Despite these hurdles, the police made crucial breakthroughs by leveraging informants, analyzing phone records, and meticulously examining ballistic evidence. Informants from within the criminal underworld provided key intelligence, shedding light on the victims' recent movements and associates. Their information pointed toward Jack Holmes and Michael Steele, two known figures in the Essex drug trade, as potential suspects. Phone records also played a pivotal role in building the case. Investigators traced calls made in the hours leading up to the murders, revealing contact between the victims and individuals linked to Steele and Holmes. This evidence suggested that the trio had been lured to the secluded location under the pretense of a meeting, only to be ambushed and executed. Ballistic evidence further supported the prosecution's case. Forensic analysis confirmed that the victims had been shot with a pump-action shotgun, a weapon commonly associated with criminal activity. Although the murder weapon was never recovered, ballistic tests linked similar firearms to Steele and Holmes, adding weight to the case against them. In May 1996, Jack Holmes and Michael Steele were arrested and charged with the murders. The prosecution argued that Steele, a known drug dealer, orchestrated the killings as a preemptive strike against the victims who had allegedly crossed him in a drug deal. Holmes was implicated as an accomplice who helped execute the plan. The trial, held in 1997, was one of the most high-profile in British criminal history, attracting intense media scrutiny. Prosecutors presented a combination of circumstantial evidence, witness testimonies, and informant reports to build their case. One key witness was Darren Nichols, a former associate of Steele and Holmes, who turned informant and provided detailed accounts of the planning and execution of the murders. Ultimately, both Steele and Holmes were convicted of the murders and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a recommendation that they serve a minimum of 25 years. Their convictions, however, remain controversial, with some arguing that the evidence against them was insufficient or unreliable. The case has since become a focal point for debates on the use of informant testimony and the reliability of circumstantial evidence in securing convictions. The Rettendon Murders investigation showcased both the complexity of organized crime cases and the challenges of delivering justice. While Steele and Holmes remain behind bars, questions about the true events of that fateful night continue to linger, keeping the case in the public and legal spotlight even decades later. The Rettendon murders have been steeped in controversy, with allegations of police corruption and mishandling of evidence casting doubt on the fairness of the investigation and trial. Critics argue that the reliance on informant Darren Nichols' testimony was problematic, given his motivations and questionable credibility. Nichols, a former associate of the convicted men, provided detailed accounts of the planning and execution of the murders, but his testimony was uncorroborated by direct forensic evidence. For some, this raised concerns that the police may have leaned too heavily on an unreliable witness to secure convictions. Claims of police corruption have also lingered over the case. Some believe that the Essex police, under pressure to solve such a high-profile crime, may have cut corners or suppressed evidence that didn't align with their narrative. There have been allegations that key evidence was mishandled or omitted, potentially skewing the investigation's outcome. While these claims remain unproven, they have fueled public skepticism about whether justice was truly served. Beyond the official account, alternative theories about the murders continue to circulate, many pointing to the possibility of a rival gang or a larger criminal conspiracy. The victims were deeply involved in the lucrative and dangerous drug trade, a world rife with competition and betrayal. One theory suggests that the killings were a professional hit ordered by a rival gang seeking to eliminate competition in the ecstasy market. This idea is supported by the calculated, execution-style nature of the murders, which many believe points to experienced killers rather than Steele and Holmes. Another theory posits that the murders were the result of a larger criminal conspiracy involving influential figures in the drug trade or even corrupt officials. Some suggest that the victims may have been silenced to prevent them from revealing sensitive information about higher-ups in the criminal hierarchy. This perspective highlights the complex and shadowy nature of organized crime, where allegiances shift and secrets are often worth killing for. Decades after the murders, the debate over the true perpetrators remains active. Steele and Holmes have consistently maintained their innocence, with supporters arguing that they were scapegoats for a crime they didn't commit. Campaigns for their release have drawn attention to perceived flaws in the case, including the reliability of the evidence and the motivations of key witnesses. For many, the Rettendon murders symbolize more than just a violent crime. They reflect the challenges of achieving justice in a world where power, corruption, and violence often intertwine. While the official narrative holds Steele and Holmes responsible, the unanswered questions and alternative theories ensure that the case continues to captivate and divide public opinion. As time goes on, the Rettendon murders remain a dark and enigmatic chapter in the history of British crime. The Rettendon murders have left an indelible mark on British pop culture, serving as inspiration for numerous films, documentaries, and books. Among the most notable are Essex Boys, 2000, and Rise of the Foot Soldier, 2007, both of which dramatized the events surrounding the crime. These films, while fictionalized, introduce the story to a global audience, portraying the gritty and violent world of organized crime in Essex. The characters, based on Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe, became archetypes of the dangerous allure and eventual downfall of the criminal underworld. Television specials and true crime documentaries have also explored the case in detail, often focusing on the controversy surrounding the investigation and the theories about who truly orchestrated the murders. These adaptations, though varied in their approach, have contributed to the ongoing fascination with the case and cemented its place in the canon of infamous British crimes. Beyond its influence on entertainment, the Rettendon murders have significantly shaped public perceptions of organised crime in the UK. The case exposed the brutal realities of the drug trade, highlighting the violent power struggles that occur behind the scenes. For many, the murders served as a stark reminder of the human cost of the ecstasy boom that characterised the 1990s rave culture. The calculated nature of the killings and the subsequent media coverage painted a vivid picture of a world driven by greed, betrayal, and violence. It brought attention to the broader issues of gangland feuds and the challenges law enforcement faces in dismantling criminal networks. The case also sparked discussions about the societal impact of drug trafficking influencing public attitudes and policies surrounding narcotics and organised crime. Ultimately, the Rettendon murders remain a defining moment in the history of British crime, not just for their brutality, but for their enduring legacy in the collective consciousness. The fascination with this dark chapter continues, ensuring that the events of that December night in 1995 are not easily forgotten. The Rettendon murders were more than just a shocking crime. They were a harrowing reminder of the human cost of a life steeped in violence and greed. Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe were not just criminals. They were also sons, fathers, and friends, leaving behind families who would forever grapple with the loss and the public scrutiny surrounding their deaths. The ripple effects of their murders extended far beyond their immediate circles, deeply affecting a community already grappling with the dark realities of organised crime. This case also casts a long shadow over Essex and the broader UK, illustrating how the pursuit of power and wealth within the drug trade often ends in tragedy. The murders exposed the fragility of alliances within the criminal underworld and the high price of betrayal in a world where trust is fleeting. As we reflect on the Rettendon murders, it's crucial to remember the broader societal implications. This wasn't just a story of three men and their fate. It was a reflection of the unchecked violence, corruption, and exploitation that can flourish in the shadows. Decades later, the case continues to serve as a grim, cautionary tale, urging us to confront these darker aspects of society with both vigilance and humanity. That's all for this episode of Fatal Flashbacks, where we revisit the crimes that still haunt history. Remember, the past may fade, but its echoes remain, reminding us of the fragility of safety and the power of vigilance. If you enjoyed this journey through the shadows, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share Fatal Flashbacks with others who dare to look back. Have a case you'd like us to explore? Reach out, we're always listening. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.